Joe Biden is in Japan. Yesterday, he killed the Quad summit. But he has made time for the G7 summit, and he has good reason to not avoid this one. America's credibility is under threat. The G7 is a group of the world's 7 biggest economies. They meet every year for a single purpose: to keep the global economy stable. Guess what the G7 is worried about this year? The American economy. The US is 2 weeks away from a potential default. It will spell disaster, not just for them, but the whole world. It will impact every member of the G7, and that's what they're worried about. So as Joe Biden landed in Japan today, he had his task cut out. He has to assure his partners that America will not default. It won't be easy, and it's quite an anticlimax for him. His visit to Asia was supposed to be a grand foreign policy project. Instead, it's been cut short, and it's off to a shaky start. He has cancelled the plan to visit Australia and Papua New Guinea. Thanks to him, the Quad summit in Sydney has been called off. The US president must rush back to firefight at home to negotiate his way out of the debt crisis. And this will be easier said than done. So the world is worried about what may be in store. As Biden left for Japan, he tried to calm nerves.
America will not default. And every leader in the room understands the consequences if we fail to pay our bills. And it would be catastrophic.
Catastrophic, he says. It's not an exaggeration. His government has 2 weeks to fix this. They need money to repay debts, government debts. They need to be able to borrow more, and for that, they need the US Congress on board. It must agree to further borrowing. It must raise the limit or the ceiling of debt. But the Congress has Republicans, and the Republicans seem to be in no mood to relent. Listen to what they're saying about Joe Biden's Asia visit.
Mr. President, stop hiding. Stop traveling somewhere else. America wants an American president focused on American problems, finding American solutions. We have them here for you.
The world heard that, and they got the message. There is no resolution yet, which means a default is very much possible. Over the weekend, there was a meeting. G7 central bank chiefs and finance ministers met in Japan. What did they discuss? The US debt ceiling crisis and the political stalemate in America. Reports say the crisis constantly figured in the discussions there. US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said there will be a default if the political impasse doesn't end. Yellen said this standoff is quote-unquote more difficult than those in the past.
A default would threaten the gains that we've worked so hard to make over the past few years in our pandemic recovery, and it would spark a global downturn that would set us back much further.
Her British counterpart, Jeremy Hunt, shared an assessment too. He said it would be, and I'm quoting, absolutely devastating if the debt limit is not raised, and America's economic growth will be, quote-unquote, knocked off track. Japan's finance minister later confirmed that the US crisis was indeed discussed, but he refused to share the details.
At the G7 working dinner, a wide range of views were exchanged on the fiscal and monetary issues of each country. Secretary Yellen also mentioned the United States debt ceiling issue. It's a rule that we generally don't mention the statements made by foreign countries, so I would like to say only the fact that the statement was made and refrain from going into details.
After the talks, a joint communique was released. It did not mention America's debt crisis, but it's evidently the focus of G7 conversations. Leading institutions like the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank have raised an alarm. Let me share their statements. The IMF said a US default will have quote-unquote serious repercussions. We would want to avoid those severe repercussions, and for that reason, we again are calling on all of the parties to come together, reach consensus, and resolve the matter as quickly as possible. This is what the IMF is saying. Then we have the World Bank. It says clearly distress in the world's biggest economy would be negative for everyone. The repercussions would be bad to not get it done. This is the World Bank. So this American crisis, like I said, will impact all of us. And Biden will be expected to address this. He's been talking to the Republicans. The last round of discussions was held earlier this week. Both sides suggested they could end this crisis soon.
I don't have any comment.
We hope they do. But it's not over till it's over. We'll keep you posted on how it plays out in Hiroshima. So Ukraine is waging a diplomatic offensive, not just to woo the global south, but also to convince its biggest ally in this war, the United States of America. Turns out all is not well between the two partners. For months, Ukraine has been asking for fighter jets, but Washington has refused. So now Ukraine has started a pressure campaign. It has roped in Europe, and it's finding support there. The idea is to put pressure on the US and force it into giving Ukraine what it wants. The effort began this week. Zelensky hopped around key European capitals. Everywhere he went, he asked for fighter jets. Italy and the UK were on board. Germany remained non-committal. France agreed, even offered to train Ukrainian pilots.
We have opened the door to training the pilots.
In France? Ukrainian pilots in France?
And we're doing this with several other European countries which are ready, and talks are ongoing with the Americans.
London is willing to push the needle even further. They announced an international coalition, an alliance to help Ukraine get F-16s. That's an American warplane, remember, F-16.
Yes, look, we are going to be a key part of the coalition of countries that provides that support to Vladimir and Ukraine. Now, it is not a straightforward thing, as Vladimir and I have been discussing, to build up that fighter combat aircraft capability. It's not just the provision of planes, it's also the training of pilots and all the logistics that go alongside that. Now, the UK can play a big part of that.
Who else is part of this coalition? Reports say the Netherlands and Belgium. Just like France, they're willing to train Ukrainian pilots. Denmark, too, is said to be involved in the discussions, but we're not sure if they're formally part of this coalition. In the past, though, they have expressed willingness to share their F-16s with Ukraine. So it sounds like the pieces are finally falling in place. But there's a small hiccup. Who would Ukraine get these planes from? Like I said before, the F-16 is an American plane. It is built by a company called Lockheed Martin, an American company. Several NATO countries use this plane. So Ukraine can get it from two sources, either the United States directly or one of its NATO allies. Now, so far, Washington has refused to share these jets. So Ukraine is depending on its European partners. They would like Europe to share the F-16s with them. But even that is complicated. You see, for any third-party transfer, you need permission from Washington. So unless America agrees, this transfer cannot happen. Listen to what the British Defence Secretary said today.
We can do what we've done throughout this, and Germany has been doing this with us in the International Donor Coordination Cell in Ramstein, which is we can enable other people who wish to. So if Boris is right, this is up to the White House to decide whether it wants to release that technology.
So where does Biden stand on this? He hasn't said yet. A few months back, the Pentagon was asked about this. A senior official said, "I don't think we're opposed." Those were his words. At the same time, he also said that a decision has not been made yet. So the US has avoided the issue so far, but it will soon have to make up its mind. Important meetings are lined up in the weeks and months ahead, where this issue is expected to be discussed. The G7 summit this week, for instance, or the NATO summit in July. So America will have to decide sooner rather than later. Why are they hesitating, though? Why won't the US share F-16s with Ukraine? Because it wants to avoid a direct conflict with Russia. If Ukraine gets the F-16s, Putin will have another reason to escalate this war. And who knows, Moscow may see American and European targets as fair game. And that's the scenario that the US is trying to avoid. Same with Germany. Here's what their defense minister said.
I'm not a person who adheres to never-isms. I can't say today for certain that today's answer will not be a different one in 3 years. It is all a question of circumstance, of course. At this moment, we are not there yet, and we have not changed our position on this.
That may give Joe Biden some breathing room, but the issue will not die anytime soon, because Ukraine won't stop trying. Move over Tom Cruise, we say, because there's a new Mission Impossible man in town. Meet Li Hui. He's China's special envoy for peace in Ukraine. He landed in Kyiv on Wednesday. He also held talks with President Volodymyr Zelensky and his foreign minister. Kyiv had just one message for him. Peace talks are fine, but do not tell us to give up land or freeze the fighting. Any peace deal must respect Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. That was Kyiv's message to China, as expected, which raises the question, what exactly is China trying to achieve here? What is their game plan? But first, let's get to know this peace envoy that Xi Jinping has sent. Li Hui joined China's foreign ministry in 1975. His focus, Soviet Union and Eastern Europe. That focus never changed. Throughout his career, Lee has handled Russia and ex-Soviet states. He became Deputy Foreign Minister in 2008, and the next year he was sent to Moscow. He stayed there for 10 years as ambassador, Chinese ambassador in Moscow. This was an important time for China-Russia relations. Bilateral trade tripled. Putin and Xi became best buddies, and a strategic anti-West partnership was forged. Lee played a key role in all of this. He got the Order of Friendship from Vladimir Putin in 2019, and that's the highest honor given to non-Russians, the Order of Friendship. After Moscow, Lee moved on to other things. He became China's special envoy for Eurasia. He's got friends in most East European capitals and ex-Soviet states. Also, he's a Russophile. He speaks Russian. He also loves Russian literature, apparently a big fan of Tolstoy, Chekhov, and Dostoevsky. Long story short, he's not a lightweight. He's a seasoned diplomat, and he knows the region well. Does that mean he'll succeed? Well, that depends on his brief from Beijing. What has he set out to do? China released a 12-point peace plan earlier this year. It doesn't even call this a war. It talks about the crisis in Ukraine. And Zelensky knows this. He may keep asking Xi Jinping to put pressure on Putin, but even he knows the political reality. China is not going to compromise Russian interests. Not because they love Moscow, but because Russia's setback is the West's gain, and they don't want that. Which brings us to China's game plan. What is Beijing hoping to achieve? We can think of two things. Number one, some good press. Who doesn't love a peace envoy? And that too, a seasoned and powerful one. The world hated China's aggressive wolf warrior diplomacy. So this is their new strategy, from wolf warrior to peace warrior. It's a good try, but nobody's buying it. And reason number two, to keep a check on Russia. Now, don't be fooled by the ice cream dates between Putin and Xi. This is not a relationship that will last for ages. It's like that bromance you see in Bollywood movies. The actors may act like equals, but one is a hero, the other is a sidekick. So who's the sidekick here? Well, temperamentally, neither Putin nor Xi. But Russia's economy cannot match up to China, so Beijing sees Moscow as a junior partner, if not today, then sometime in the future. They also have territorial disputes and differences over Central Asia. So Xi Jinping wants to keep Moscow in check. This peace mission could serve that purpose too. It's a strategy to increase or reduce the heat on Putin. Where does that leave Ukraine? Zelensky's major problem is this: he can't do anything on his own. His tactics, his decisions, his future, everything is dictated by the West. And why is that? Because Ukraine doesn't have support beyond them. Reports say Zelensky is trying to change that though. He's launching a major diplomatic offensive. His target is the global South. Ukraine is planning to send ambassadors to open embassies in more than 24 countries in the middle of a war. 24 countries. These are in Latin America, in Africa, and in Asia. The idea is to build up a global coalition against Russia. As part of this plan, Foreign Minister Kuleba visited Africa in October. Ukraine wants to tackle Russia's main narrative, that this campaign is limited to NATO. That's what Russia says. And that beyond NATO, no one is bothered about Ukraine. Kyiv is trying to change that. It promises to be a tough task, though. For starters, Russia is an established African partner. It sells wheat, weapons, and mercenaries. Plus, Moscow has launched its own diplomatic offensive. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has visited 14 countries in Africa and Latin America. And remember, this is only in the month of May. 14 countries. And that's the problem with last-minute diplomacy. It never really works. Passionate appeals cannot replace decades-old partnerships. New embassies cannot substitute years of neglect. I'll give you an example. No Ukrainian foreign minister had ever visited Africa until 2022. Africa has 54 countries. Not a single visit in 31 years. It tells you why diplomacy is important. Good relations are forged over years, not through new ambassadors or embassies, and also not through ice cream dates, by the way. It's a lesson for both Russia and Ukraine. Do you remember this picture? It was among the most iconic ones of 2021. A massive container got stuck in the Suez Canal. For 6 days, no ship could pass. The losses ran up to billions of dollars. Back then, many experts called for an alternative, or at least a backup to the Suez Canal. Well, Russia and Iran believe they have found one. On Wednesday, both countries signed a railway agreement worth around $1.6 billion. The plan is to link two Iranian cities, Rasht on the Caspian Sea and Astara on the Azerbaijan border. The route will be 162 kilometers long. It is expected to be completed in 4 years. Both Iran and Russia are betting big on this project. Senior leaders from both countries oversaw the signing. Vladimir Putin and Ibrahim Raisi, the two presidents, joined in virtually. Here's what the Russian president said.
The goods transfer via this corridor will have significant competitive advantages. For example, the goods delivery from St. Petersburg to, let's say, Mumbai will take about 10 days. In comparison, the delivery through traditional ways will take about 45 days.
There's a reason why Putin used the example of Mumbai, because this railway isn't a standalone project. It's part of a bigger idea, the International North-South Transport Corridor. It was first proposed in the year 2002. Iran, Russia and India were the moving forces. The idea is simple, yet grand. Create a 7,200-kilometer long corridor, 7,200 kilometers. It will link the Indian Ocean to the Persian Gulf to the Caspian Sea to Russia, and from there to Northern Europe. It's a mix of everything, really. Shipping lanes, roads, railways. The plan is to get the goods to ports on the Persian Gulf, and from there, the ships take over. But how will this rival the Suez Canal? Because right now, it's the only route from Europe to Asia. This map should give you an idea. The starting and end points are the same, but the route is different. If successful, it will be great news for global trade, but getting there will be hard. The Suez makes up 12% of global trade. It has the head start of more than half a century. Plus, Russia and Iran face massive sanctions. Iran for its nuclear program, Russia for invading Ukraine. So building such a massive network is going to be tough, which is why this project hasn't really taken off yet. Some parts of this corridor have been built, but rivaling the Suez Canal is a long way off. But for the moment, let's keep the economics aside. What does this railway deal mean politically, strategically? It's a sign of how far Russia-Iran relations have come. During the Second World War, the Soviets invaded Iran. The Soviets were an occupying power for nearly 5 years in Iran, but today there are no hard feelings, it seems. In fact, Russia is one of Iran's closest partners. Moscow overtook China to become the largest investor in Iran. Around $2.7 billion was invested last year. Bilateral trade is almost $5 billion. That's 20% more than in 2021. There is a defense cooperation too. Iran is expected to get Su-35 fighter jets from Russia. 24 of them will be arriving later this month. And what did Russia get in return? Reports say drones. Apparently, Iran is smuggling drones to help Russia and Ukraine. Tehran denies this, but it's a hard sell. Putin has personally invested a lot in this relationship. He visited Iran in August last year, just his second foreign trip after the invasion began. He also backed Iran's entry into the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. What explains this close strategic partnership? One reason is Western sanctions. Both countries are feeling the pinch, so why not join hands and undermine the West? Iran gets much needed investment in weapons. Russia gets a partner in West Asia. Both sides are also supporting the same guy in Syria, President Bashar al-Assad. So basically, it's all about give and take. Iran needed new partners after the Abraham Accords. Russia needed new allies after the Ukraine invasion. The puzzle fit perfectly and the partnership was formed. The North-South corridor could cement this relationship. But will it rival the Suez? As they say, only time will tell. Over in Pakistan, there's trouble brewing. Or should I say more trouble brewing. Police officers have surrounded Imran Khan's house in Lahore. They're setting up roadblocks. They're patrolling the streets. It looks like the calm before the storm. Everyone seems to be asking the same question. Will Imran Khan be arrested again? He released another video, a video address on Wednesday. This is what he said.
मैंने अभी सुना है कि जनाब 40 दहशतगर्द मेरे घर में हैं जिनको मैंने पनाह दी हुई है और कहा जी कि हम इनके ऊपर कोई घर के ऊपर कार्रवाई होगी 40 दहशतगर्द को पकड़ने के लिए। मेरी रिक्वेस्ट है आपको कि 40 दहशतगर्द अगर घर में हैं तो मेरी जिंदगी को भी खतरा है। मेहरबानी करके जरूर आए यहाँ, लेकिन इस तरह ना है कि कोई दावा बोल के इस तरह करें, सर्च वारंट लेके आए एक मुहस्सब माशरे की तरह आए कि कोई नाम तो दे, ये दहशतगर्द है कौन, और आए हम आपको सारी दिखा देते हैं घर में किधर है, कितने दहशतगर्द हैं.
Imran Khan says his arrest is imminent, and looking at the pictures, that seems to be the case. But the government of Pakistan disagrees. Here's what they are saying. Imran Khan is hiding 40 suspects involved in last week's violence. If they're released, the siege will end. That's what the government says. And if they're not, well, use your imagination. Imran Khan had been summoned by investigation officers today. There are more than 100 cases against him. This one was linked to the Al-Qadir case. But Imran Khan skipped the summon. He sent a written response instead, and that was snub number 1. Snub number 2 came on social media. Look at what Imran Khan is saying. And I'm quoting, "Nation has been taken over by a bunch of crooks, criminals and duffers devoid of any ethics or morality." So he is on the war path. He has no intention of giving in yet. And where does that leave the army? Army Chief General Asim Munir broke his silence on Wednesday, and it was about time. He was visiting the Sialkot garrison, and this is what he said. I'm quoting again. "The armed forces will not tolerate any further attempt of violating the sanctity and security of its installations or vandalism. We are resolved to bring to justice all the planners, abettors, instigators, and executors of vandalism on the black day of 9th May. That's the Army Chief of Pakistan. And he's talking about last Tuesday. Imran Khan supporters had flooded the streets. Some of them had stormed military installations. So now the army chief has promised action, or rather, revenge. What does the army plan to do with them? Military leaders say they will be tried under the Army Act. And this would be a drastic step. The Army Act is usually meant for soldiers and officers. The trials are not done in civilian courts, they're done in military courts. And the punishment? Even life sentence and death penalty. You can see why the army would like that. The civilian courts have protected Imran Khan once. Chances are they will protect him again. So why not take the courts out of the equation completely? Why not try his supporters in military courts? Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif has supported the idea. He's calling for the toughest punishment possible.
ये पुकार कर ये मुतालबा उनका है कि जो बेगुनाह हैं उनको हाथ न लगाया जाए, जो गुनाहगार हैं किसी भी हवाले से उनको करारवा की सज़ा मिलेगी, तो फिर रहती दुनिया तक आइंदा इस तरह का वाक़या दोबारा रूनुमा नहीं होगा.
So that's where things stand. The army has cornered Imran Khan in Lahore. What does he do next? Is this the last stand? Or is it the start of something bigger? The last time around, the army made a big mistake. They went for the head of the snake. They arrested Imran Khan first. We all know what happened next. This time, they're using a bottom-up approach. Around 7,000 of his party workers have been arrested. Some senior leaders are also in jail, like Fawad Chaudhry. He was Imran Khan's loose cannon minister. Chaudhry had been released by the Islamabad High Court on Tuesday. He was happily heading home when this happened. Videos like that will intimidate leaders. Reports say many PTI leaders have quit the party. A lot of them have quit politics altogether. So here's the question. If Imran Khan is arrested again, will there be a repeat of last week? Or has the army action frightened them? This will be the real test of Imran Khan's support. Meanwhile, China is also trying to make new friends, or perhaps steal some of Russia's. What are we talking about? China is courting 5 Central Asian nations this week. It's holding a summit, the China Central Asia Summit, the first of its kind. The venue is the city of Xi'an in China, one of the most populated cities in Western China, also historically significant. At one point, Xi'an was considered the starting point of the Silk Road, the ancient trade route that connected China to Europe. It went through medieval Central Asia. It enriched everyone along the way. Xi Jinping wants to stress on that ancient connection. He wants Central Asia on board for his new Silk Road. It's called the BRI, Belt and Road Initiative. He also wants to use this opportunity to expand his sphere of influence. You see, these former Soviet republics have historically been dependent on Moscow. But now that Russia is busy in Ukraine, China wants to swoop in. Our next report has more.
There's a historic summit taking place in China, a summit between Xi Jinping and the leaders of 5 Central Asian nations. They're meeting in the western Chinese city of Xi'an. When the Central Asian leaders arrived, they were given a grand welcome. Song and dance and honor guards greeted them as they stepped off their planes. Xi Jinping didn't hold back. But why is China so invested in this summit? Because it sees a golden opportunity, a chance to strengthen partnerships while the rest of the world tries to decouple from China. The 5 nations invited are Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan. They all lie between China, Russia, and Iran, at a critical juncture between the West and the East. China has already invested billions in the region as part of its Belt and Road Initiative. That's China's plan to create an overland trade route linking it to Europe. The name and trajectory of the BRI are a nod to the ancient Silk Road. The Silk Road connected China to Europe for thousands of years. It passed through the region where the 5 Central Asian nations now lie. So it's no coincidence that the city of Xi'an was chosen for the summit.
I would like to extend a warm welcome to President Tokayev to attend the summit in Xi'an at my invitation. I'm very happy to play host to Mr. President.
Your Excellency, Mr. President, I am very happy to meet you in the ancient city of Xi'an.
Distinguished Mr. President, I am really glad to meet you in Xi'an, the start point of the ancient Silk Road and the ancient city with historic significance. We are looking forward to the China Central Asia Summit to be held tomorrow.
Xi is meeting the Central Asian leaders individually today. Tomorrow there will be a joint summit. China is expected to pledge higher investment in Central Asia, in the railways and natural gas sectors. There are also talks about reducing trade barriers and pledges of everlasting friendship.
The two sides should vigorously carry forward the traditional friendship, firmly support each other, deepen mutually beneficial cooperation, jointly pursue development and rejuvenation, and build a China-Kazakhstan community with a shared future featuring everlasting friendship, strong mutual trust, and solidarity.
This may not go down well with Russia. You see, all 5 nations that China has invited are former Soviet states. They became independent after the fall of the USSR, and they've remained in Russia's sphere of influence. Now that may be changing. Russia is busy with the war in Ukraine, and these countries are stepping out of its shadow. Kazakhstan has refused to recognize Russia's annexation of Ukrainian regions. Tajikistan has demanded more respect from Russia. Their unease over the war makes sense. Ukraine is a former Soviet state, just like them. So courting China makes sense, at least for now. It's not clear how Moscow will deal with this. Guess the response will have to wait until after the war.
For our next story, let's talk about Princess Diana, one of the most photographed women in the world. Nearly every move of hers was followed by the paparazzi, so much so that it led to her death. She died on August 31st, 1997, in a car crash. It shocked the world. Her vehicle slammed into a support column. It flipped and came to rest in front of oncoming traffic. The car was speeding. Do you know why? Because she was being chased by a swarm of photographers. She was trying to evade them. As divided as the world was about British royals, it united in calling her death a loss, a tragedy. Something similar echoed this week, this time with her son, Prince Harry, along with his wife Meghan Markle and her mother. They were in New York. They just attended an award ceremony, but as soon as they left the event, the Duke and Duchess became involved in a car chase. They're calling it a quote-unquote near-catastrophic car chase. And who was chasing them? The paparazzi. They allegedly made the royals' transport challenging. No arrests or injuries have been reported, but according to claims, the risk of injuries was high. Listen to what the mayor said.
You know, the press, paparazzis, you know, they want to get the right shot, they want to get the right story. But public safety must always be at the forefront. Of the briefing I received, two of our officers could have been injured.
Reports say there were numerous photographers in half a dozen cars, driving recklessly, going through red lights, driving on pavements, blocking other vehicles, all while taking photographs. That shows some serious dedication, but not the good kind. We can't help but question this perseverance, because this isn't the first time paparazzi has come under fire. An aggressive photographer once rammed his vehicle into a celebrity's car. There are often reports of paparazzi stalking celebrities, even following their children. Celebrities have termed this predatory and invasive. Many have taken photographers to court, but despite these celebs calling out this behavior, there is no change really. And with the advent of social media, things have only gotten worse. Paparazzi work to feed eyeballs, the public's voyeuristic obsession with the private lives of celebs. The juicier the content, the better. So for them, Meghan and Harry are the perfect fodder. The media has endless appetite, it seems, for stories about them. They're renegade royals. They have a frosty relationship with the crown. They're constantly fighting the royal security detail and battling the paparazzi. Prince Harry is currently involved in multiple legal disputes with the press. There are allegations of phone hacking and gathering information illegally. But his fight with them is not new. When Princess Diana died, Harry solely blamed the press. He called them a pack of dogs who followed her, chased her, harassed her, called her names. He claimed they would wait for her to overreact just so they could take a picture. And this does sound cruel. Of course, these are all claims, but hundreds of celebrities and influencers have come forward with similar allegations and stories. They say they feel like zoo animals. They question their safety and that of their children's. But the same problems persist. So we ask, is it okay to violate someone's privacy for Instagram likes? Is it okay to follow someone's children to school? Paparazzi play a crucial role in tabloid journalism, but the chaos they bring must be questioned. And the media frenzy should come with consequences. Now, we're creatures of habit, at least most of us. We wake up at a certain time, have our morning tea or coffee, and get to work, and this pattern repeats day after day. But when it comes to healthy habits, the pattern doesn't seem to last. Do you wonder why? We all want to eat better, we all want to exercise more, we clearly have more help than ever before. Celebrities want us to try detox drinks and join the hippest fitness cult. The internet throws health tips around like confetti. We watch all of it, and honestly, it's a little exhausting. Turns out that's literally why we don't achieve a healthy lifestyle, and I'm not the one saying this. A new survey it says we're too tired to be healthy. And if you can relate to this story, it's for you. But even so, is there a way out? Our next report explores.
We all want to live longer. We want a fit body, glowing skin, an intelligent brain, healthy relationships, a good career, a life full of adventure. Seriously, the list is endless. Because we want this and we want that. We also know how to get it. Study after study tells us that a healthy lifestyle will help us achieve it all. There is data to prove that exercising is great and good food is more than good for us. We understand these facts, yet we kind of do the very opposite. Sorry for calling people out. The data agrees. 80% of adolescents and 27% of adults don't exercise enough. Let's put this another way. Worldwide, 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men don't exercise enough. About 5 billion people worldwide don't have a healthy diet. 39% of adults worldwide are obese. About 1/5 of the world population is depressed. We can continue, but you probably understand what we're getting at. The irony is, there is endless information on the perks of a healthy lifestyle. There are listicles, articles, videos, podcasts, and books on how to achieve it. And yet, this is where we stand. We just don't seem to be doing enough, even though we want to. Why is that? A new study has the answer. One that has probably been hidden in plain sight. It says we are simply too tired, and we lack the motivation. Yes, we are too tired to be healthy. We want it, but just not enough. This is based on a survey in which 38% of the respondents say they lack the motivation. 35% said they were too tired to chase a healthy life. And that tracks. Food prices are soaring across the world. Gym membership fees are increasing. And even if we can afford a healthy lifestyle, we never seem to have enough time. Cooking from scratch is tough, so we just order in. Hitting the gym after work is tougher, so we just decompress with the help of our good old friend Netflix. At the risk of over-intellectualizing this, let's remember that being lazy is not a sign of weakness, it's only natural. Our ancestors strived to be lazy so they could conserve energy. They rested so they could successfully struggle to survive. So we're wired that way. But the thing is, in this modern world, we don't need to be. We are stuck in a vicious cycle. Exercising and eating well will give us strength. But we don't seem to have the energy to do that in the first place. It's understandable, but something's got to give, right? We have to break the cycle somewhere. Nutritional science is debated endlessly, but the benefits of a healthy diet and regular exercise are well established. They're good for our physical and psychological well-being. They help us breathe better and sleep better. They make us live longer and better. They even increase our motivation levels. The only ask is that of breaking this cycle, and it's a big one. But we need to take that hard first step in the right direction, because as they say, if not now, then when?
Now let's look at the US. The Wuhan virus is gone, or we've learned to live with it, but it has left a different pandemic in its wake. Clinical depression. A new study finds that depression rates in the US are at record levels. In fact, depression has been on the rise across the world. In 2021, 4 in 10 adults worldwide said they face depression and anxiety. And the numbers just keep going up. But why is this happening? A simple answer is the pandemic and its aftermath. But there's a lot more to it. Our next report brings you the details. The American dream has turned into American depression. A new study says people in the US are more depressed than ever before. This is according to a Gallup survey. It says 29% of Americans have been diagnosed with depression at some point in their lives. That's 3 out of 10 Americans. The figure is 10 points higher than what it was in 2015. The number of people suffering depression is almost 18%. That's 1/6 of America, a staggering number. What explains this? The Wuhan virus pandemic. It brought not just death and suffering, but also crippling loneliness. People under lockdown were trapped at home, separated from their loved ones, and that took a toll. That trauma hasn't been completely processed yet. Many are still reeling from long-term depression. And the effects aren't spread evenly. Women have been affected disproportionately. Around 25% of American women are currently depressed. COVID-era job cuts targeted them more. Many had to quit their jobs to look after children and the elderly. Then there are the frontline workers. In 2019, about 80% of US healthcare workers were women. So more women experienced the horrors of the Wuhan virus up close. Watching so many people die is bound to have an effect. And while this study was on the US, the numbers around the world aren't any better. In 2020, about 20% of the people around the world said they had experienced depression. The numbers were the highest in Latin America, about 33%. 27% in Russia and Central Asia, 26% in Australia and New Zealand, 20% the world over, except East Asia, where only 9% of the people said that they faced depression personally. But that doesn't mean that Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan are exceptionally happy places. It just means that the stigma of talking about mental health issues runs high in this region. Increasingly, countries are trying to fix this, to destigmatize talking about depression. And the youth is leading the way. The world over, the youth are voicing their frustration. They're sick and tired and refuse to suffer in silence.
I would not want to leave. Everyone is here, my family, my companions, my friends. But in the last 2 years, I have caught myself thinking about it. There are days when my partner and I return from a 12-hour shift. We calculate what we made during these hours as compared to the European countries, and I get depressed. I feel a sense of futility. That is the basic feeling, futility.
That's why almost all studies note that young people are the most depressed section of society, because young people talk about their mental health. And maybe that's the way forward. You can't fix a problem if you don't admit that it exists. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. We're starting with Turkey. A storm sent a sofa flying off a balcony of a high-rise building. In Cambodia, the 32nd Southeast Asian Games have been concluded with a spectacular closing ceremony. And the wreckage of the Titanic has been fully visualized in 3D for the first time ever. Also, what makes the 18th of May significant? We're taking you back in history on this day. NASA launched Apollo 10 mission. The year was 1969. The purpose of this mission was to cover all aspects of crewed lunar landing, except the landing itself. It was the first crewed Apollo spacecraft to operate around the moon. The mission also sent the first color TV pictures of the moon's surface to Earth. We're leaving you with this. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Radio back. Welcome back to Earth. Billy Pugh. Billy Pugh is an old bosun, Norfolk, Virginia. Gene Cernan first, then John Young, then Colonel Stafford.
Email exchanges from inside the BBC, they talk about the risk of violating Indian laws. It's easier to rake up the freedom of speech debate, but does it give anyone a free pass to knowingly violate the law? America supports India because it needs India's support in return. And India is working with the US because it suits India's interests. This is how geopolitics works. Last night, he diffused a crisis with his defense minister. But today, Netanyahu was confronted with a new problem. His cabinet seems to have rebelled against him. The UK is looking at the Indian subcontinent to fill its coffers. That India seems to be negotiating from a position of power, like a partner and not a former colony.